Hey, welcome to From the Baseline with Premier Basketball Report. I'm Mark Williams. I'm joined by Jason Key and Shane Laflin, and we appreciate you tuning in to this episode. It's been a while since we've done an episode. Sometimes life gets busy and other tasks and jobs kind of take our attention, but we're glad to be back in the middle of the AAU circuit and kind of a little lull from the spring. We've had USA basketball, which we're going to talk about on this episode, where they did under 17 trials and under 18 trials. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about rankings on this episode. And so we're excited to bring this to you. But fellas, before we get started, how are we doing? Just checking in. Shane, Jason, everything been well this spring?
Life is good. Busy. Hit a bunch of stops all over the map, both live period and non-live period events. Life-wise, kids growing, right? Jake back from freshman year in college. Jackson moving on to 8th grade, so on and so forth. So a lot, like you said, a lot going on beyond just what we do here at Premier. But yeah, great spring as we dove into the rankings. Getting the 2 live periods specifically, but non-live period viewings too. We saw a good mix of everybody pretty much in the country live, which obviously played into it, a lot of film work in that. So yeah, man, the show goes on.
It does. And Mr. Laflin, I see you sporting your Prime Events shirt already, starting the branding, getting it rolling.
That it's been solid. I mean, that March, that mid-March through the May eval period is a real long sprint, it feels like. So you come out of that and have a little bit of a revamp and a recuperation time, and then kind of plan the summer. So that's kind of where we are now as we hit Prime West and then Prime East, and then obviously in between that time, usually glad USA basketball happened. The trials were always great. Jay was out there. So but other than that, we're moving and prepping for July, and you get through those periods. But that March to May is serious. You look up and it's Memorial Day weekend. So a little bit of a recovery period, honestly. So here we are.
Absolutely. Well, busy spring. I know the highlight and kind of the end of the spring is always Memorial Day weekend, and for us it's traditionally USA trials, and due to COVID, they didn't have trials, and not like they used to. And even this year with the under 17s, it was back, which was fantastic, but it was a reduced number, and it wasn't the 178, 180 that they've had pre-COVID. And so Jason had the opportunity to go out there for the under 17 trials. And so Jason, how was your experience?
Yeah, it was interesting, right? With the reduced number, 40 total, 20 invited, and then 20 at large through lottery system type situation. So that made it interesting from the beginning, because to your point, you didn't have the 3 full courts full of kids going, that kind of thing. It was 2 courts, reduced, a lot more focused early, a lot less media than normal, media / evaluators and even parents. It didn't, obviously with only 40 kids there, it wasn't the stands behind the evaluators weren't as full, so it felt more intimate.
Right.
I thought as it went along, it was the normal process. So they ran, they did a bunch of skill work early, get a feel for the kids, and they started separating into teams. And we would speculate as to what they were up to as far as matchups or putting certain on the same team and all that goes with it, right? And I want to say, especially for us, we're probably the ones that can understand it the most. Very difficult process. There's no right or wrong answer, and so you go with the 12 that you think make the best team, along the same lines of how we work rankings, right? We're as fair as possible, but end of the day, it comes down to a little bit of opinion too. Mm-hmm. And same kind of thing. So I thought it was interesting. Every year I hit generally 8 to 9 of the 12.
Right.
And that was right on the number again at 9. So one day I'm gonna break that 9 wall. Me and USA Basketball are gonna completely agree. But it's interesting, and I'm not one that whines about who does and who doesn't make it. I don't think that's part of my angle. I just see it as interesting. So yeah, it was really good though. Really well done. It's a new regime there.
Right.
So that's interesting. For the first time in 25, 30 years. 25 years probably, you have from top to bottom kind of a new way of doing things, and you could see them trying to settle. I think it being smaller help with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that from what I understood, I could see it maybe not being 40, but I could see it being reduced to 70, 80, and not going all the way back to the 125 plus. Right. Yeah. So that'll be interesting to watch moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and when it's 120 plus, I mean, you've got about a day and a half. It just feels like chaos because kids are coming in, and it's a constant flow, and it's tough from an evaluation standpoint. And I can't imagine being on the selection committee and having to weed those down. I mean,
right.
And naturally, when you have that many, there's kids who shouldn't be there, like don't have a shot to make the team, and that's an easy cut. But when you get to around 78, 80, it gets tough. And so, big shout out to the selection committee, and they always do a very thorough job, and try to make it and stuff. And so, hey, Shane, talk a little bit about USA Basketball. And Jason alluded to this, and we talk about it all the time, especially when we go and trying to watch as they're moving and making teams, and as they're trying to find lineups. The process of USA Basketball, because some people, when they put out the team, they get frustrated, and you got social media and Twitter and, oh, this kid's the best. And it's not always being the best. They're not creating an all-star team. They're creating a team to represent the nation in the United States. Shane, talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, and Mark, you've given insight to us in terms of, and we watch, right, the different styles. So the U16 team and the U17 team are preparing for two totally different environments. Absolutely. And quite frankly, competition levels. Mm-hmm. And so you also have that particular year in a player's development that is a real growth year. There's some real separation that goes on a lot of times between, the freshman sophomore team, and then it's like a sophomore, junior, rising senior sometimes team. So and those teams need to be built differently because their competition is different. The U17 competes in Europe. The fact is the basketball is better than when they compete, against the South American teams and the U16 FIBA America. So, right. When you're putting together a group, you want to have, a philosophy. Your staff has to have a philosophy of how they're going to play, because you've got to work for something. You've got a small amount of time. So it's not as if you can completely adjust your style to your talent availability also, because you have to start with an idea of what it's going to look like. Yeah, any good coach is going to say, okay, maybe I started here, here's my adjustment, but you've got to have a baseline. And I think, in this case, Sue Phillips is plenty experienced. She coached the team last year. There's some familiarity, but again, they're going to go in to this year playing, different styles and quite a bit more experienced and talented basketball teams over there. So, you're putting together a group that can be cohesive. You've got to get your general positions, but then understand, sometimes the easiest way to generalize with positions is, okay, we know we're going to have point guards. We know we're going to have bigs. We've got to have some shooting. And then it's going to be like, okay, who's in between that puts that together, and some of that's based on obviously your talent pool, and some of that's based on a little bit of preference and familiarity. And, you kind of go from there and then build towards what your style is going to be, I think. So, with the pool that they had, obviously a really good pool, you're always going to have, people you watch, and you've got some people who stood out individually, but sometimes maybe that doesn't mesh with what goes on. And I'm making this up, but like if you've got a really dynamic 2 guard and you've got some other quality 2 guards, maybe that dynamic 2 guard that's a volume shooter or whatever doesn't get in, right, because you've got some complementary players that go well at the 2-3. That's just going to function better in terms of versatility and experience in those things. So it's not just an individually talented thing. And you are not probably going to win games over there with just out talenting people.
Yep.
You're going to have to, a lot of times, with the short preparation, you've got to defend and you've got to rebound. But it's not as if you can just have the best player and that player rides, and unless you have like some of those generational bigs or things like that. So, looking at the makeup of this, and Jason, we talked during the whole USA trials, but who was standing out and who did what. I mean, obviously this is the first thoughts is this is a really balanced team. It looks like they're going to be able to play some small ball. The one question I had when looking at the roster, and it's not as if there are not capable shooters on here, but I thought maybe there would be one more or one like designated like sniper shooter. Like this is what this, and that's just, again, I wasn't there. From the outside looking in and building a roster and looking at the pool, you have a feel, we have a feel for these players. That was the one thing that I looked at. And so I immediately look at it and say, okay, they're going to play some small ball. It looks like maybe press a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Which, just to the strength of their team, we'll see. Obviously, like Sue at midi is not known for like that's not their bread and butter necessarily. But I'm quite confident she's well versed in being able to coach, presses. But I'm just looking at it, going, okay, we probably can speed the game up a little bit, especially because you've got some fours and forwards that are kind of also 3 type of players, and then the small ball, because if your forward group is Jaden Donovan, Nunu Agara, Madison Booker, Morgan Shelley, they can all put the ball on the deck and shoot the 3 decently, not great, but decently. And then so they're going to have to get on the glass. They're going to have to speed the game up a little bit, I think. And then my only thing is, with matchups is Bria Cunningham, McKinley, Randolph, Kennedy, Ume kind of being your 4-5s. Does that limit your switchability in, short shot clocks, and then against the better European teams that are going to literally have like stretch 4s and 5s, but you look at this roster and like, man, that would be fun to coach. That would be fun to play with. Like, you feel confident going in. But again, those are just, conversational questions, not questioning or not judging, but like, you just, you look at that. And Jay, you mentioned a few that stood out. But this is obviously really good roster. This is a really good team. And stylistically, that's my read without having watched them like do their real practices.
Yeah. And to his point, I think the 2 interesting things here is they are a smaller group overall, it feels like, even in context of who was at the trials. Like there were some bigs, true 5s that didn't make it, for whatever reason. And so they went small for a reason, it feels like, and pressure being that. And I think 2 things stand out with the guards. 3, the fact they have 3 smaller guards. So we're talking under 5'10", we'll say, in Cambridge, Jada Williams, and Hannah Hidalgo. So that tells you they're going to push tempo, because that's typically with USA, they don't have 3 smaller guards, 2 maybe, right? And so that tells you a little bit about they're going to try to play tempo. And then I think the strength obviously is the 2 guard and the wing with Juju and Michaela, and how they play together, where they combine, that kind of thing. That's the strength of this team, along with, to Shane's point, the flexibility of the bigs, especially defensively. To his point on players, like whether it was Riley Nelson, the Maryland commit, or Ali Zeeble, I thought one of those 2 is your knockdown shooter that, for whatever reason they didn't go with. But I thought both of those was interesting. Olivia Olson, we know to be a knockdown. I didn't see that in my times there, like just in the trial portion, but we know away from that because we've had our eyes on her quite a bit. So those 3, from just a shooting perspective, interesting, right? They're one of those, because that would be your designated shooter. that Shane's talking about. And then just a couple of shout outs on kids I thought did really well that didn't get there. But Kendall Dudley is that versatile piece, right? There are versatile pieces on her like that, like her, that have likability. But I'm a huge Kendall Dudley fan, great passer. So I thought she was really good at trials. And then I said this often to you guys, but the bigs too, Blanca Thomas was really good. Really caught my eyes. I hadn't seen her in that type of environment with elite all around her. So that was she really caught my eyes. Huge fan of Blanca Thomas coming out there, stock riser. And then Joyce Edwards and Sienna Betts, both two really good young bigs that they were really good at trials. And so when you go, I mean, that's how hard this is. Those are really, really good players. We're talking top 10. Joyce Edwards case number 1 in the country in her class, 24. So we're talking like elite of the elite players. So that'll tell you to the team building conversation and all that. It's very interesting to watch.
Well, and a couple other things that not on the court that play a factor in all this is, does the group get along?
Oh, for sure.
Because it's such a short time frame from trials to training camp, especially under 17s, because it's early July. You go trials to training camp for majority of these players, this is their first trip overseas.
Right.
Mom and dad aren't going to be there. Mom and dad can't bail. And so there's a lot of that. Do they get along? Do they mesh? How are they pay attention to, especially the ones that they invite, how are they when they stay there on the campus of USA there at the trials? Are they a loner? Do they, all that stuff kind of plays into it because of just the trip, the type of trip, especially under 17s. The other thing is and Shane alluded to this, under 16s is different from under 17s from the competition level. Under 16s, arguably we could take anybody from the top 80, top 100, in the United States and go probably win that thing. Because it's usually us and Canada 1-2. Under 17s is different. We're dealing with Spain's, we're dealing with the European kids who play, in the European clubs and their development. You getting Australia and Japan and China and Korea, depending on the year, maybe New Zealand in there, and their style of play and their development. And so it is a much more competitive experience environment at the under 17s. And, to some of y'all's point, I agree. I'm looking at this, a lot of great players. You can tell that the style that they're going to play just from the roster, but they're going to see some zone. And so are they going to be able to execute A, in the zone, but B, be able to have shooters to hit? Because you're talking about playing with the shot clock, 24-second shot clock, the international shot clock. I don't have to play zone very long to keep you out of the paint and make you chunk it from the cheap seats. And so, we're going to see who can hit those shots, and whoever can hit it is going to play more, especially from the wings.
And that's where this roster's makeup. I mean, your small guards that Jason talked about, your lead guard, Jada Williams, experienced, good leader. Proved once again at this year's, EYBL stop at Boo, just all around, gets it done. You see it through the stats, you see it through the play. Capable shooter. Jelani Cambridge is rounded back into shape, found her range again after, I think, missing a little bit at the end of high school season with some injury or whatever. And then Hidalgo made a concerned effort in the offseason to go improve her shooting, and she was on fire at Boo, and to the eyes and to the stats. But I think the strength, I mean, the best players on the roster are Juju and Michaela Williams. And like, we're talking two players, that amongst any class would be considered some of the best players in their class. So you've got two, and the good news is they're not just solo scorers. They know how to make plays, and they can both shoot it from the perimeter, and get to their spots. What's going to enhance them, I think, is you've got Madison Booker, Nunu Agara, McKinley Randolph, Morgan Shelley. these are all really good glue utility types.
Mm-hmm.
So those guys can play, if you're being zoned, short corner to wing to high post, movement. They know where to put the basketball from
Right.
any spot on the floor, which is going to put these other playmaking guys in the position to do what they do. But the good news is the playmaking guys aren't just they are. What I'm saying is they're multifaceted. So it's not as if they just have to be on the wing or they just have to ISO at the top.
Right.
So I think what we're going to see is in that small ball, people hear small ball and they think dribble, drive, dribble, drive, dribble, drive. This to me is like, I can go put it in my forwards' hands, let my guards work off the ball. And that especially helps you against the zone. Because it's not just the guards. We're not just pounding this inside. This is not going to be a high-low team.
Yeah.
There was a U17 team one year that ran a real compacted offense, double low block, and it was not conducive to the competition, and it limited them. I don't see that happening with this team just because of the makeup and then just the experience at the coaching position. So it's interesting. I just think that's what I look forward to seeing is just how great those two great players are in Juju and Michaela. And then the rest of these players are elite, but showing the value of having glue utility forwards that are good passers. Like Madison Booker is a really good passer.
Absolutely.
Nunu Agar is really good in the pinch, in the high post, short corner creation. McKinley Randolph is like, Draymond Green when he's good. I know in the last game he was not good, but like Draymond Green when he's good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I look forward to. And then you've got Bria and Kennedy who can go mix it up, be physical, and own some paint. So, and I'm a big Morgan Shelley fan. I think maybe she's not a hot name on everybody's radar, but I watched film late with Mitty, and she's really good. And obviously Sue's very familiar with her. And then you've got Jaden Donovan, who can just make plays that people cannot make. So that's the part. It's that those middle pieces that I think make or break this team, and IQ is going to help them win because you gotta have that to beat these European teams. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing. That's what I expect to see.
And I think when we talk small ball, we're talking defensively, right? People, and you're talking about having to deal with the zone there. But when we talk about three, especially the three guards being smaller and then not too many true fives, not 6'3" and plus, that tells you defensively what they want to do. Offensively, it's going to flow. And like you said, you have a lot of decision makers, smart kids. They're going to end up getting good shots and are versatile enough, hopefully, to make enough shots, right? To spread it out for Michaela. And Michaela and Juju themselves are going to have to make perimeter shots. That's going to be a big part of this.
Michaela, but as you said, Jason, like you have 2 through 5 switchability.
Yeah.
For the most part. And late in the shot clock, it doesn't hurt you if you flood the paint with help or you decide, per your scout, what you're willing to give up late in the shot clock. You can switch your 1 through 5. And that's with actions now, the way things are spaced out, you almost don't have a choice sometimes.
Right.
Late shot clock, ball screen, you don't want to get in rotation. So that's going to be interesting.
It is.
Yeah. And then lastly, Kennedy Ume is the only 15-year-old. I don't know when her birthday is, but that's something also that USA Basketball does a lot of is a carryover kid that next year will be eligible for the U16s. So that happens quite often in these situations. There's one that gets the experience of being on the team, some playing experience and all that, knowing that they're going to have to kind of lead the next one.
Absolutely.
Well,
and sometimes it gets lost in all this is people look at it as just one team. USA Basketball at the end is looking at their senior women's team and trying to involve as many people who they project could potentially be a member of that, and they want to give them a taste of USA Basketball. And that's why typically your U16 team is not the same as your U17 team.
Right.
And there'll be a core style of play, different things, but it's different. And so congratulations to everybody who made the under 17 team and the other under 18 team. That is a great honor to represent the United States. Those who got invited, hey, congrats. That's a big deal too. And so they'll have training camp here in the next couple of weeks. They will play July 9th through the 17th is the under 17 Women's World Cup. They'll be in Hungary for that. So I know there are a lot of college coaches who will be over there for that, like there always is.
Talked to 3 or 4 yesterday that talked about their first half of July schedule, them leaving, taking the 8th off, or they're out a day, they're out another day, take a day, and then head on over.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting. Some will go over for the whole time. Some will do most of early July and then go over for the end of it. It just depends on which kids they're really going to go see and sit on. So travel preview is coming out, rosters for players.
Look forward to that. Mark will have our coaches ready, and then it get us educated. Then I take my schedule from there and start setting early alarms for the YouTube. I assume it will be the YouTube games. So
yes, it'll all be on YouTube. So even if you don't get a chance to go, you can check it out. So hey, we're gonna take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're gonna talk rankings. That's always a good topic, always Shane's favorite. And so we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Like, ride with me if you ride with me, you can slide with me if you feel like. Ride with me if you ride with me, you can slide with me if you feel like. Yeah, that's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? That's a bet, right? That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? Hey.
I'm not asking for much. I'm just asking you to lock in for 3 straight games. All right, you got 2 games and a half. We come down here for 4 really good, intense games. That's not hard. We come down here to do something special. Lock in and do it, all right? Let's go. Finish on 3, 1, 2, 3. Hey, PG. Every time we've done it,
we gotta have a sense of urgency.
We're getting to the ring.
That's it, and that's all. It's about heart, y'all. Effort. We need the bench involved. We need all that. So what we gonna do? How we gonna come out of it?
Keep playing with energy and keep getting one shot. Box out hard and let's run.
Y'all gotta want it.
On track, now we going way up. W is a layup. Fuck the next, stay up. Counting all the way up. Counting blessings, yeah, you know we pray up. On track, now we going way up. Now we going way up. Now we going. On track, now we going way up. Now we going way up. Now we going.
Hey, welcome back to From the Baseline with Premier Basketball. Hope you enjoyed our conversation there about USA Basketball and the trials, and we look forward to watching the under 17s and this next week the under 18s plays in Buenos Aires, Argentina, one of my favorite places to visit. So good luck to both of those teams as they represent the United States. But another big thing happened this spring, and it always brings about much discussion and many thoughts, and people give us their thoughts regularly, which is good. We like the conversation, and we're going to talk about rankings. And just so you know, we like healthy conversation. We have healthy conversation between us three, and you throw in KP with that conversation. Us four, there's a lot of healthy conversation and stuff. And so, but let's talk a little bit about our latest rankings there with ESPNW. And Jason, we're going to go Jason first. Jason, talk about the process that we go through. I mean, this isn't just something we do haphazardly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first and foremost, it's a year-round thing. It includes any and all events that we can watch live. When you start talking on, October, I'm gonna just start our fiscal year there for here with Wooten Camp, and you got many of the best players in the same building, so you can get a context from a camp setting there. Then you get into high school, into which we watch. We go to many a tournament. We go to individual games. We watch a lot of film. There's more film involved than people will ever realize as far as watching high school games all over the country. Then you go into the spring and you'll have a kickoff camp or two, and then into the non-eval period, live period tournaments that we watch. And then you go into the live period tournaments, which are more spread out than ever. I think that's a big point of emphasis that you're going to hear from us, and that it's more fair than ever, in my opinion, but it's also more spread out than ever. And so there's a lot of context as to who you're playing, where you're playing, all that matters, right? Your competition matters. And then from there, you go into the analytical piece of looking at stats, especially when you look at like Booth per se, or the First Stop Under Armour, the Adidas Stop, so on and so forth. We look at, your shooting percentage, your assist to turnover ratios, the context of the score. Did you win games or not? Who were you playing? Was it the elite of the elite within your own circuit, or, was it a build up to the elite? So there's a myriad of factors that go into this, and it is a huge undertaking literally probably thousands of man hours are spent on over different periods. And then behind the scenes, something I do is I talk to college coaches about how I'll call the interview process and recruiting process is going, and their feedback on kids, because they get to know these kids through recruiting them on a personal level, that we, detailed level that we're not going to all the way with most of them. And so I do a lot of background information on the kid and what they see and the feedback they give me, and that matters. And then there's healthy debates there's a very select few college coaches that I really trust, and we'll talk a comparison, because this is a comparison game with rankings, comparison of kids, and go back and forth. And I really value the times we don't agree, because then it's easy for us both to say player A and is a little bit better than player B for whatever reason. But when I think player A is better and they think player B is better, and we get into why. And it may be projection. It may be a specific niche, whether it be shooting or defensively or rebounding, whatever. And so there's a lot that goes into this, a lot more study and understanding of the whole picture and the background than people will ever realize.
And the process is thorough. I mean, we try to be as thorough as we can, and have healthy conversations. And it's not one person way. We go back and forth and all the time, and throw in KP there. And at some point it's, hey, who likes who more? And we go there. But, one of the things you talked about is matchups matter. And we talk about it all the time, is that's your measuring stick at the end of the day. And is you go head to head, and everybody's game is a little bit different. But when you get matched up, that's the opportunity that you get to make a case that you are better than that player as far as your rankings is concerned. Shane, talk a little bit about, the classes overall. And what did we see this spring, and the growth, and how that's affects some of the movement, but just the overall classes.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the May one expanded the 2023 class to 100, the 24 class to 60, and showed the debut of the freshman class, which I think is, the first appropriate time to have a little bit of a rankings discussion for classes after they played some varsity basketball. We hear a lot of who the best so-and-sos are coming up in junior high, and I always tell people, like, they ask that question, I tell them, it's not relevant yet, because there's so many growth factors and opportunity factors, and you have less opportunity to play against the other better players in your class sometimes as a middle school player. So you see some projections, but I just don't think there's a such thing as a best player until they've had enough playing, right? So you're talking most talent, but not best player yet. So that's about the first time that's appropriate. I think overall, in the 23 class, there was 100. I looked, I counted 11 to 15 more that we made cases for potentially having in and around that bottom quarter. But ultimately you have a finite number in 100. And then kind of analyze positionally and size wise and skill wise. We've got a pretty well-rounded class in terms of position in the 23 class. It's not as if it's like 75 guards, 3 posts, and a bunch of wings.
Right.
So I think that's good. And at the top, as we just talked about with a handful of those USA basketball players, we've got some players that can be elite beyond their class potentially.
Right.
Which is not always the case. So that was kind of what the impression that class left on me after we came out of that. We put out the rankings, we came away from it. And I went back and looked at it as we prepped. 24 class. I think this one's a little bit more interesting. There were maybe 5 more that we made a case for the top 60, but after that we felt good about the pool. And in this case, this class, it's interesting. It's about the top 20, and then it was hard. And I would say we're waiting on some separation, and that's not a knock on the players. It's appropriate because of the age level.
Right.
But I would also, in terms of Jason's process, because things are spread out and because there are other factors at play, and because we've got a little bit of elements of the game and the culture of basketball evolving, one of the hardest things I have with all of this is a consistency of effort. And I would say, like, right now in that 24 class, that's how that next crew is going to make their separation arguments. And that's how whoever goes from this section to this top section is going to get there. Or if somebody in the 20 were to drop, that's the hard part for me. I want to believe in the effort and the intention and the maturity of the game and a player to really lock into those high spots. And I, if you're a top 50 player, you're pretty good. Yeah. But that's, that's the element outside of things being spread out a little bit, which that's great because that means there's more opportunity for people. That's really good. But the consistency is what's made it tough. And then going into the 25 of the freshmen, there were probably 5 more that we talked about.
Yeah.
And the philosophy there, and I had this discussion with a few club coaches with the ones that are willing to have discussions and ask questions and get on the same page in terms of understanding, which we try to do, as Jay alluded to, through conversations in this process. But the 25's got to be a little bit of, we try to make it semi-positionally representative because there's still, the younger you are, the more projection is allowed to be a factor, in my opinion. If you're a young, big, active, showing skill, you have a more, you get a benefit of the doubt. But if your motor hasn't improved and it's time to rank you going into your senior year and it's still the same motor, you can't stay there, those kinds of things. So that the smaller the number, the more positionally represented you kind of want to be in terms of philosophy and what we're doing. And then some of that is just, some have had the opportunity to show it and some have not. And that's the subjective element of this. And as we gain this responsibility, we have tried to provide as much objective opportunity as possible, whether it's aligning with a camp circuit like an Elite has earned, or creating the prime event, or rather than having the best independent teams all spread out all over the place, trying to get them in one spot so we can have them have an identity, but also play against each other in these viewing periods, because the shoe circuits do, through no fault of their own, segregate some of the talent sometimes. So we're trying to provide those opportunities as much as possible, but it's not as if we're punishing the people who cannot do those things or are not. That's to each his own. We're just trying to eliminate some of that. So anyway, like I said, the smaller the number, some of it is opportunity based. And we acknowledge that. And to be 100% right is silly. And to have conversations, any range of a 10, in any segment, you can make those arguments. And we do have sources across the country that we consult with. They understand their region pretty well because they're in those gyms. Like you mentioned, obviously, and then, you try to get the people who aren't tied to much, like a Katie Hensel, to say what she's seen and offer that coach's perspective. And then you try to go to the people in the regions that have proven to us to be as agenda free, and then aren't upset when we ask them about the potentiality of like their own biases in terms of the region, because we know we have them too. So it's not as if we just go out. It's like, okay, you've seen the people that we see all the time. What do you see about ours as well? So we do try to balance that. And opinions abound, and it's for conversation. If you're not in a list, it's not a negative. We have to discuss and have a reason why we make those decisions, but it's not as if we're being negative about the ones that maybe didn't make that list. And I think that's a really big thing. And then, I think that in terms of doing this, the resources, the responsibility, the accountability that the platform has, I'll double down on the fact that I made the statement that I don't know anybody else that's willing to put in the amount of resources and time to do that. And that's not a knock on somebody. It's just the fact that we're lucky to have that backing and that team. But it's so spread out right now. I don't see representation at all the things that we're covering. So, and I think people think we take this stuff personally. Not really, maybe competitively. But not personally, because we feel good about our effort. And then, the insinuations of agendas and puppetry and we're doing this to do this, like, trust me, this is, as Jason said, a pretty engulfing process. Nobody has time for all that.
No.
So nobody has time for all that. It's unbelievable.
No. And really, for us, rankings, for a lot of years, we never put rankings out publicly, just because it was internal conversations. It was for coaches. And when we started putting it publicly, really the reason we did it is to help grow the game and people to provide some motivation, whether where you're at or where you're not at, if you're not happy where you are, because lot of people, parents, players, coaches, need to have perspective from a global and a national standpoint of where they possibly fit within the national rankings of players, and based on some trusted sources. And that's only going to make us better if we take it healthily and have conversations and realistically look at the game and go, hey, where am I at? Where's my flaws? What's my strengths? How can I get better? And then the idea of growing and players developing. We want kids to get better. We want the kids to see that and go, ooh, and provide motivation. Hey, put it up on your door, put it up on your window, go to work. I mean, and that's what we ultimately want to have happen. And we want the game to get better. And that can only happen through honest conversation and a thorough process. And like Shane and Jason's talked about, I mean, we go to great lengths to provide that and stuff. And so, you know, we know putting it out, we're not going to make everybody happy. And you know what? That's not why we do it. We don't put it out to make people happy. We put it out to be a trusted source of information and where that player is at that time. And that's why there's multiple times we redo the rankings. And case in point, if you don't like it right now, we got the month of June to work. We're going to see you in July. We're going to do another rankings, somewhere early September-ish time, early October. And so you got July, you got the prime event finals, you got some of your September stuff to go work on your game and seize the opportunities that you have. And for those, you want to get in front of our eyes, hey, we're providing a lot of opportunities. There's the prime events, there's the PBR events, we're all over the country. Hey, make sure and pay attention to the events that you're attending and take advantage of those opportunities when we are in your region. That's only going to help you and stuff. And so, but rankings are always a touchy deal. You know, there's always many opinions on it, but it's something we take serious and try to do our best on. So.
It's an interesting role and, a responsibility we take serious. And, I think, Mark, you made a good point in terms of perspective. So we're not just talking about the game here. Mm-hmm. The game is growing. We see foreign players in every league. We've seen a little bit of a pause in terms of our participation in basketball overseas. Mm-hmm. We're obviously with our USA teams venturing into that. U18 starts next week. U17 you talked about earlier. So, Mark, you are our global expert in terms of the scouting of players and informing us and college coaches. So, what is going on? Give us a snapshot into what's upcoming and what to look forward to in these international competitions upcoming, maybe in this next month of June as we prep for July.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the good thing is global basketball is back. Especially from a youth side. We'll have a full summer slate of all the FIBA events. Basketball Australia is going to have all their teams there at under 16s. Central Basketball, Basketball Without Borders is back. They hosted their European camp in early June, and in May they did their Americas, which is North to South America. So those camps are back. NBA Global Academy is rolling back, and so really from a global standpoint, it's fantastic because they're all back. And so college coaches are already booking their flights for under 17s. I talked to somebody yesterday about Europeans under 20s, under 18s, under 16 Europeans, Basketball Australia under 16s. And so coaches are really excited to get back and be able to get back overseas. So, the biggest thing is Basketball New Zealand this last week hosted their under 19s, which is in New Zealand, they do 13 years of school. So those are most of the 22s and 23s and so they always do a good job. Their reps are by their clubs, and then they have a school championship in October. And so there's under 19 reps, and Waikato won it, and they historically put out a ton of guards. And so they won it this year over Canterbury. In a really good final back and forth. And then Wellington took third. And so this week, that report will hit the database and will go out to our global and international subscribers. And so There's some kids there still available in New Zealand, and they've historically put out a lot of players to all kinds of college, to the levels, and most noticeably is of late is Charlize Slager Walker at Washington State, and so they've got BCS players all the way down. Yeah, and she's
Cold.
cold, and I remember in Belarus talking to some colleges, BCS colleges, just about Charlize, and they're like, I don't know, because on the national level, New Zealand doesn't have the depth at the under 17s to really compete. She had to carry a load, and I'm like, guys, you're gonna put players around her, and she is going to be fantastic, because all she got to do is score, which she can do, and she's shown that at Washington State. So, the good thing about global international players is there's a lot of them. You get pockets where you have a recruiting advantage. For a lot of them, they don't. The difference between a BCS and a mid-major, they're not really worried about that. They want to go somewhere where they can develop and where they can improve and ultimately to come back and play pro. And so it's exciting this summer. We got a lot going on and a full slate. So college coaches, I sent out on premierbasketballreport.com. There's a whole summer preview of pretty much almost every event that is there to be noted. There's some more I'm going to update this week on, but go check that out. Travel previews will be coming out, and subscribers will get rosters and players to know and post-event reports and stuff. So it's just fun. It's back to being international basketball as we know it. So it'll be a lot of fun there. But well, we appreciate you tuning in. I know we've talked about a lot USA basketball. Jason had the opportunity to attend to fill this in on players who did well there, and we talked about rankings, a little bit of global basketball. But we appreciate you tuning in to this episode of From the Baseline. For Jason Key, Shane Laflin, I'm Mark Williams. We'll see you at the baseline.